Welcome to the second video in the Learning Design series. Since we learned about the information processing model in the last video, we will devote this one to understanding instructional design strategies to apply that model and make our learning sessions interesting, effective and applicable. My name, folks, is Prastha Saxena and you are watching video 2 in the Learning Design series. So let's get started. In this video, we will explore what parts of the human information processing system can be used to design better learning, how to make learning stick, how can learners remember the learning for a longer period of time, how to facilitate timely retrieval, which is how can the learners be enabled to recall and retrieve what they have learned. If you saw the last video, we had learned about the information processing model. If you did not and wish to, a link is provided in the description below. We had learned how we take in millions of pieces of information every second through our 5 senses and how all this information goes to the sensory memory, but only the pieces that we pay attention to get transferred to the next level, which is a working memory. And by solidifying these pieces through rehearsal, we can transfer it to the more permanent long-term memory. Starting now, we will go over each of these 3 memories and strategies to solidify the whole process so that our learners can learn better and recall when needed. The first of these is the sensory memory. In a learning environment, the learner is receiving lots and lots of sensory information. They're seeing you, your presentation, hearing your voice, other sounds in the background, each other's voices, a lot of noises, seeing each other, and there's a lot of information that they're just receiving. But how do you and I ensure that the content does not get lost with all this load of information? The key is attention. And anybody who has ever delivered a training program or a training session will agree that holding someone's attention is a very difficult task indeed. So how do we do it? We begin with understanding what catches human beings' attention, and then we use that knowledge to make sure that our material and presentation is catchy. So what captures our attention? Something that is significant. If we feel something is important, we pay attention to it. For someone taking a flight for the first time, they listen so carefully to the air crew's instructions because they feel it is important. Something that stands out. If everybody around us was in uniform and only one person decided to walk around in their beach clothes, it would capture our attention and we would remember it for a long time. Thirdly, something that is surprising. You must have seen those videos where everything is going normal and then suddenly a ghost face pops up. It's surprising, it's unexpected, and hence we pay the most attention to it. So now we explore how to design learning that is significant, that stands out, and is surprising. Significant. How to capture attention by making the learning design important to the learner. The first concept is front-load relevance. A course is not a mystery novel that needs a big reveal at the end, so don't keep its usefulness a secret or save it for the end. Give the learners a reason to pay attention from the very beginning and tell them how it's going to help them. A simple way is to present learning objectives like we did at the beginning of this video. State, then restate. Tell learners the purpose of the course and have them restate it in their own words to increase engagement with the concept. This involvement right from the start ensures that learners are attentive throughout the course. Make it useful right now. By letting students know that the information you are presenting is useful right now, you are making the course very hard to ignore. As a species, we human beings have evolved to pay attention to what's needed next. That's basic to our survival. Give them that. Also, give them choices. Give them choices in terms of what they will learn, when they will learn, how they will learn it, and the activities they will perform. Let them form their own groups. Ask them how they would like to do certain things. Make it realistic. Try to make the learning more practical and less theoretical. There's so much information available on the internet all the time that theory can be learned from a variety of different resources. It's the application that they're looking for in your course. Include actionable steps. You should ideally provide an action plan at the end of the learning so that learners can implement that learning. Something that stands out. Use awesome titles. Never underestimate the power of a good title. You can call your program Excel Training, or you can call it Using Data to Make Competent Decisions. What's in a name, right? Apparently, a lot. Design for the goldfish. We live in a world where attention is a luxury. Devices around us keep beeping and competing for our attention. The average attention span has been reduced to 8 seconds, a second smaller than the goldfish. To create material for the goldfish, you can do the following. Create a logically structured design. Make it searchable so that they can focus on what's important to them. Use a lot of keywords. Include questions throughout. When people have to think around forming an answer, they naturally pay attention to things. Go bite-sized. I personally call it small conquerable units. Make small units of learning, and we will learn more about it later in this video when we talk about chunking. Leverage technology. Design courses that can be taken on a mobile device while commuting also. People have less time, more to do, and more of the less time that they have now is being spent on electronic devices. So why not use that time? Why not use that dependence on electronic devices as well? Something that is surprising. Use unpredictable cues. So if you're looking at a screen and then something pops up, it is bound to hold your attention for a long time. These are unpredictable visual cues. You can also use some audio when people are not expecting it. Ask pop-up questions in between just to make sure that people's attention is involved. A great strategy is to violate expectations and captivate. When people are expecting you to go in a certain way, follow a certain path, and then suddenly you take a detour and suddenly you do something that they're just not expecting, their attention comes crashing back to the present, to where they are, to where you are, to where the course is. And that's a brilliant strategy to capture people's attention. Include gamification, personalization, and social learning. Why do we like playing mobile games? They appeal a lot to a lot of psychological nuances, such as being better than others and showing it off through leaderboards, etc., moving from level 1 to say level 180, simple to complex. I will be doing a complete series on these 3 strategies here. It's a very long topic, and we will use strategies from gamification, personalization, and social learning together with adult learning principles to design exceptional learning. But for right now, to make things surprising, include gamification, personalization, and social learning. A summary of all the actionable strategies we have learned. You can take a screenshot and keep it handy if you want to. The second concept of instructional design relating to sensory memory after attention is habituation. Habituation is when we get so used to a sensory stimulus that we no longer notice it as being there. So if you're sitting in a room and there's an AC unit, it has been humming all the time, but before I mentioned it, you were not noticing it because you had become habituated to it. In fact, if you notice, these 2 things, they've been here from the start of the video, but you had zoned these out. It is called banner blindness in marketing terms. Had these 2 words been kept at different places throughout the video, you would have not been so oblivious to it. This principle can be used to manipulate designing of learning by ensuring that habituation occurs to some point, to make learners comfortable with learning, and ensuring it does not occur at some point so that the material and delivery captivate attention. The idea with habituation is to maintain a perfect balance between consistency and variability. Consistency can be useful to make things easier for your learner and can be ensured by using similar structures, formats, and templates for different chapters or modules so that learners can adapt to the cosmetics and focus on the actual material. Too much consistency is bad. It can lead to habituation in your learners. You want to vary your teaching methods and the way that you present information. For example, if you're creating an e-learning program and if you give the same type of feedback in the same location every single time, then learners are going to learn to ignore it. Particularly if the feedback is a very generic, good job, right answer type. While some variation is useful, forced variability just for creating a difference is extremely irritating. Imagine the feedback box we talked about. If it just kept randomly popping at different places in the screen and it was different colors, it would be extremely annoying. We would not be able to focus on the actual material. Instead, we could just take the same box and designate, say, 2 places for it and keep them consistent across each module. Second level in the information processing model is a working memory, where all the magic happens. This is where all the transactions with all the information takes place. Though the sensory memory has a finite capacity and the long-term memory is infinite, none of these are able to interact with the information. It must reach the working memory for any transaction to take place. As instructional designers, we can utilize some of the working memory concepts to make learning more efficient, effective, and retrievable. Two major concepts that we are going to use are those of rehearsal and chunking. Under rehearsal, we can use both maintenance and elaborative rehearsal. We discussed about these in the last video, what these are, and in this video we will be discussing strategies to apply them. Chunking, we can use both group up and break down strategies. The first strategy is to strengthen maintenance rehearsal. That is, when information is repeated so that neural connections in the brain get strengthened and it becomes effectively coded. Whenever we learn something new connections are formed in the nerve cells. And every time we repeat that, the connections become stronger. The stronger these connections are, the more effectively we can apply, remember, and recall that information. The first thing that we can use is to make sure that our learners practice. Because practice might make perfect as well, but practice definitely makes permanent. When we repeat information by practicing it again and again, it is like overwriting on the same line, which means the pattern gets stronger, solidified, and hence more permanent. So at the end of each module, just ask a couple of revision questions, or if it's a training that spans a few days, we can always begin by recapitulating the previous day. Design interleaved interventions. Human beings' attention naturally fluctuates. And you can design your courses in intervals to allow for this inevitable variation. Recapture their attention every 5 to 10 minutes by shifting the focus of information. Allow for implementation cases. Nothing makes learning stick better and longer than when people can apply what they have learned. Review periodically. Sending periodic practice material is also a great way to keep learning fresh in their minds. Invite continuous feedback. Ensure that the learners can reach out to you even a month after the training has been delivered, because learning can either happen continuously or not at all. The next concept is elaborative rehearsal. We know some things that are already stored in our memory. We make connections of the new information we learn to the existing ones and attach the newer pieces to the existing ones, and this is called elaborative rehearsal. Neurons that wire together fire together. This is a basic conditioning concept. If two things happen together for a few times, our brain starts to treat them as a unit. Also, if I were given some positive feedback each time I did something good, that would make me want to do it more. So both classical and operant conditioning can be used here. Using images. A lot of what we learn is visual and we associate images with it. So instead of showing text only, try adding images to your content. especially moving ones because they are better recalled. Use mnemonics. We all remember how we use the word BODMAS to remember the order of mathematical operations, the bracket of division, multiplication, addition and subtraction. Lengthy instruction can always be facilitated by mnemonics because it helps make connections better. Use existing knowledge and examples to build up the material. So jargon plays a very important role here. If you're delivering training to a particular department and they do a particular kind of work, use examples from their line of work. They'll be able to connect with it better because they have a very strong existing knowledge base of that. You have to ensure that your learners to walk before they can even attempt to fly. The next concept is chunking. This is when you take individual pieces of information and group them into larger units, like phone numbers. You do not remember a 10-digit phone number as 10 units of separate information, but 3 separate units of, say, 3, 4, and 3 numbers, and so on. To apply and facilitate chunking in our learning design, we can either break down or group similars. To break down, these are the things that you can do. Bite-sized learning. Especially if the module is self-paced, especially if the learners are taking it in their own time and their own places. Ensure that the concept is broken down into smaller components, each delivered individually. Prioritize this. Depending upon what learning will be used latest, use those first. Create groups of modules and of learning material. Go screen by screen. Explain one screen, be done with it, and then move on to the next. To group up. Modularize the content. Create separate modules. Pre and post assessment module. Start a module, ask people questions that will tell you where they are currently and where you want to take them. So create a whole GPS kind of a system. Screen level chunking. One screen should display one concept. Ideally, unless it's a summary slide or a summary screen, do not display different concepts, and if you do, create a whole hierarchy. The third part of the information processing model is a long-term memory. It has a permanent storage and it keeps information for an infinite amount of time. But it's like this huge storage area from where you have to extract information back into the working memory to operate on it. In learning design, long-term memory concepts to be used centered around facilitating encoding and decoding phenomena. So when you take information and through a process of encoding, you transfer it to the long-term memory, it's called encoding. And when you recall that information and retrieve it back into the working memory for some transactions, it's called decoding or retrieval. We'll need to consider how the information will be used when it's retrieved. Will the learners need to recognize the information? Will they need to recall it outright? Or will they need to be able to use it to actually do something? Now, how do we do it? Why is it that novices get overwhelmed when practicing a new skill, but experts can do it easily? Simply because experts have this huge store of knowledge encoded safely in their long-term memory that they can retrieve when they want, and through practice have made the process of retrieval really quick. Just like a chartered accountant can recall the rates of interest and various tax slabs in a second, but you and I cannot, I specifically cannot. So if somehow as learning designers, we can accelerate the process of encoding and retrieval, we are already halfway there. Under encoding, there are two major strategies that we use: assimilation and accommodation. Let's say a child learns that this is a cat. They develop a design or a schema in their mind to represent a cat. Then later, let's say you took the child to a jungle safari and they saw a cub. Since he has a similar look, the child calls the cub a cat. This is assimilation. This is how we modify new information, which is the cub, to match the information that we already have in our mind, which is the cat. So similarly, if you were designing training for a computer language, let's say, you can use some tests and tools to find out what your audience currently understands about languages. Let's say they know that a language is something that has elements like words and grammar that's needed to use it. You can give that example so that they can use the existing knowledge to understand this new concept better. That computer languages also have some elements and there's a grammar. When the child called the cub a cat, you would explain to them that this is not a cat, but it's a lion's baby and it's called a cub. The child then, through the process called accommodation, develops a new concept. Just like a cat's baby is a kitten, a lion's baby is a cub. And from then on, they can distinguish between the two. As instructional designers, we can design the course such that our trainees understand that while English has elements like subject, object, verb, noun, adjective, etc., and rules like subject, verb, agreement, a computer language called Java has elements like classes, objects, etc., and rules like inheritance, polymorphism, and so on. The use of these two strategies, which is assimilation and accommodation, strengthens the whole encoding and retrieval process and the long-term memory. Retrieval can be facilitated using repetition such as conditioning. So every time, let's say somebody has just learned the table of 2, and every time you're asking them multiples of 2, they have to recall the table of 2, right? So that kind of repetition, that kind of going back to the same thing again and again, strengthens retrieval. We already talked about how we can use jargon, right? Because people keep talking about their jargon all the time. They're very used. When you tell stories, when you combine the facts of things with their own experience, they can actually map the two better and they can retrieve it when needed. And lastly, something that we have talked about throughout the video, distributing concepts over modules. This is why if you see straight from class 1 till any higher education, all books have chapters. Those are modules. You divide the entire learning. You divide and conquer. You divide the entire learning mechanism into smaller conquerable units. And that strengthens all 3 parts, in fact, information processing model. So if we are just doing a recap, this sensory memory which takes in information, what captures our attention is something that is important, something that stands out, something that is surprising. There are 2 principles. There's habituation that we need to overcome, and that we can do by consistency and variability. Things that we pay attention to get transferred to the working memory. The working memory strengthens this information through two types of rehearsal, maintenance and elaborative. Maintenance is when you repeat things again and again till you remember it, and elaborative is when you attach new pieces of information to existing pieces of information. Once this rehearsal has been performed, the concepts, the ideas, the information, it moves on to the long-term memory. And to facilitate storage into the long-term memory, you can do dividing and chunking. You can break bigger things into smaller ones and combine smaller ones into bigger ones. And then use the concepts of accommodation and assimilation, wherein you modify new information to suit the existing information, and when you add new